Okay, it's 7 o'clock. The first item we have on our agenda this evening is a public hearing on ordinance number 378, electrical inspection modifications. And I will call that public hearing to order and ask if there are any present who wish to speak in favor of the ordinance or against the ordinance. Anyone? Last call. Okay, then hearing none, I will declare that meeting adjourned. And I will call to order the regular meeting of the City Council and ask you to join me in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. We'll respect the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We don't have Wesleyan students. We have a number of you from the Ritchie Tucker Street neighborhood. And, Rich, you want to update them on where we are with that?
I contacted the property owner, Carl Tenney, on, I believe it was Monday morning, and asked him what his plans were and how that particular unit came to be there. He was bringing it through town, I understand. He was close to McDonald's. The trailer originally, I believe, was removed from a lot down on Rhododendron Lane. And in the process of pulling out from that location, the axles on the trailer broke. And so it sat for a week or so down next to the old Wendling building on Preston. He then was in the process of taking it out to his location out in Ellamore. Was close to McDonald's, and the trailer itself broke in two. If you notice, the back ends actually drags on the ground. That's it.
There you go.
That could be now.
Always true.
Don't we all?
So he said he needs another set of wheels. He needs somebody to help him get it back end jacked up, and he plans to get it out of there very shortly. He did not give me a deadline. I didn't give him a deadline. I'll work with him for a little bit, but trust me, I will be monitoring the situation and contact him same time next week and see where he's at. And if we can offer some assistance in the process, we'll do everything we can to get it out of there. And he fully intends to get it out of there. I mean, there's no intent to leave it there. He wouldn't have stopped in the first place if it had held together long enough. But, and if, you know, you want to keep you folks in the loop or spokesperson, I'll be glad to let you know.
Questions?
Well, I would sure appreciate it if you would keep us in the loop.
Really?
I mean, we've had this fight for too long.
It's like deja vu.
Don't we all know?
And if he hadn't, you know, if he certainly couldn't drop that on somebody else's property or on public property and so on.
I know it was early on Sunday morning, like 7:30 in the morning when he pulled it in there. So, but yeah, if someone would keep us up to date, I mean, I hope we don't have to come back in 2 weeks.
I hope you don't either. I mean, I want to see it gone just as much as you do. So.
Yeah, we don't want to.
Can you not give him a deadline to get it out of there?
I'd say at the present time, the best thing to do would be to try to work with him and see what we can do to get it out there as quick as we can.
But let's say in 2 weeks it's still there. What alternative are we going to do at that point?
Let me work on that. I'd like to have it out of there before 2 weeks from now. So.
Well, I'll be amazed.
Yeah.
While we're on the subject of that lot, I know he did what was exactly required of him in tearing that building down, but he's left a lot of trash, dirt, blocks, What can we do about getting those cleaned up?
The judge agreed that he had satisfied his requirement and released him from
Well-
any further work.
Is there anything that the city crew could take an hour and just scoop that stuff up and get it out of there? Make it look halfway decent for those people who live up there? Since they put up with an awful lot from
They
Mr. Denny.
have put up with a lot.
Yeah.
Michael, does home rule give us more leverage than what we have currently?
Home rule under this has been utilized in places like Wheeling and Huntington to clean up abandoned properties, unkept properties. What we had talked about as far as home rule was concerned, one of the pillars would be to actually have the ability for the city to go in and clean up a property, through due process, of course, but clean up that property and actually take the costs of that property and have that directly assessed to property tax. Instead of that being a lien, the next time that individual went to pay their property tax, the city would recoup its funds for whatever cost. It could have been a solution, in the beginning of this process. Certainly could be something that we could utilize now if we had that ability. Right now, the city could go in and do that. I'm sure there would still be some type of due process in getting on their property. We would clean it up, and it would be the same situation. We could only lien on that property right now.
We've talked about a revenue stream that would come from abandoned property owners.
Yeah.
I mean, that would require an ordinance at some point in time to assess that kind of fee.
We talked about it. I think there was mention of like absentee landlords and some things like that for properties that went vacant for a year or a certain period of time. I think Wheeling is a municipality that was doing that under home rule. I don't still think we have anything like that in place, but it would be nice to have a fund set aside for whatever that we do and wherever we go moving forward, to where the city can go in and essentially abate those properties or that particular issue, and have the funds available to do that. It would be nice to recoup those funds back, so you kind of had a revolving fund, if you will. And I think that through home rule and through the process of assessing properties, recouping that money back, and put $5,000 in, you do $5,000 worth of abatements from the city, you can go and get that money back, so it's always constantly revolving based on what you collect. At this present time, unless there's something in our ordinance dealing with construction debris, I think there's something in there mentioned about construction debris, we may be able to do something there, but it would probably have to go back through that process of Randy, our municipal judge.
I believe there's also a program with West Virginia Housing that will help municipalities try to take care of abandoned properties. I think we ought to check that out.
There are some community development funds through neighborhood revitalizations, larger funds like 100,000, 200,000 or what have you, to clean up stuff on a larger scale. But there are funds available for that. Something if the council's interested, we can certainly go and look into those. But there are some.
That really wouldn't apply to this particular parcel since it does have an owner.
No, but there's some other areas that I might apply
If,
to.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
If we would go in and basically clean the rest of it up, do you think we would need, David, an agreement with Mr. Tenney to go in there and do it? Because otherwise, I could just see somebody saying trespassing and everything. We probably should get something that says, yeah, you take those old blocks off of there or something like that.
Well, first, I think that, I don't know that Randy Levine has heard the argument under the new ordinance, the newer ordinance, that allows things like furniture and construction debris to independent of what was there before. And we raised the bar with that ordinance. So I'll be happy to have some discussion with the municipal court judge about the council's position on that. And why don't we try that first? If that doesn't work, I would be amazed if Carl Tenney would object to the city going in and cleaning up his lot.
I would too, but I would also not be surprised to see him charge somebody for trespassing.
Yeah, that's a possibility. My point is you wouldn't get into the trespass issue if he would simply sign a release.
Right.
And,
right.
And we might come to some agreement with him that ultimately he would reimburse the city for the cost of what we do there. Again, don't get too excited about that, but at least it would remove the next step of the problem.
Well, you know, this summer I was upset to see the picture that was going around on Facebook about the Buckhannon yard of the month with the thing sticking there in front of his lot showing all that, and it said this Strawberry Festival yard of the month or something like that. You know, that was just that's an embarrassment, not only to the property owner who doesn't care, but to the city. And I'd just like to see the whole problem cleared up.
We have had,
Then we'll work on some others.
we have had, I actually sent one of our crews out to do, probably was a no-no, but sent him out to clean up
I know.
at one time,
Yeah.
in the fall, early
Yeah,
fall.
we did.
He did a pretty good job, made it look a little bit better, I guess, if you will, but, yeah, we sent him out there to clean that up.
The lot is for sale though, by the way.
The lot is for sale?
Yes.
What is the price of the lot?
I wouldn't be able to tell you that, I'd have to get with Mr. Tenney, but it's for sale.
I understand it's 15,000.
That's the lien value, as I recall, is on the deed of trust.
So that may be one
What
solution
he quoted
to
to me last week.
make a community playground out of it, you guys taking care of it.
I think that'd be a great idea.
Pass the hat.
But I would think that someone else needs to clean it up first. Well, Mr. Tenney was supposed to have cleaned it up and seeded it down, from my understanding, when we went through this, a year ago? And it hasn't been cleaned up and seeded down. That was my understanding when we went through all this, that, you know, he would tear that building down, clean it all up, everything would be seeded, the whole works. He was supposed to have that done by February of last year. And this is almost February a year later.
We would not have had the legal ability to insist on that, but I believe he did volunteer to
It
do
was in the
it.
paper.
Yeah.
Can't be wrong then.
Certainly not one of these.
No,
Does that-
it's on the internet.
Does that have to do with your ordinance number 375? Is that what we're talking about?
No. Well, that was under the previous ordinance. I don't know what the number was. The most recent ordinance, Dave, is 375.
Yeah.
That was-
This one's 78, so.
378,
This was
9
enacted
tonight.
July of 2013.
That's the
That's a new one.
furniture on the porch,
Yeah, furniture on the
and
porch.
construction debris, and
Yeah.
stuff like
So that's
that.
what.
That's what Dave was saying here earlier, that we hadn't brought Cracker before the municipal judge under the terms of this
That's right, Mayor.
Yeah.
latest ordinance
Yeah.
this time.
That's right.
Actual earliest notices go back probably 5 years on that
Yeah,
property.
right.
And would have been done from ordinances that were in effect at that time.
Well,
That's one of the causes for the new ordinance, quite frankly, is, yeah.
Well, good for you all.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
well, I think we ought to give Rich, 2 weeks. Rich, you think he can work with him in 2 weeks?
I'm not willing to give him 2 weeks. I'll work on him next week. I mean,
No, I understand that, but.
I think Rich has established a rapport at this point in time with the Cracker, and let's see how it works out. Everybody else has tried. Let's see if Rich can do something with him.
I understand your position. If I lived there, I'd be very upset myself.
Right.
However, Cracker is the type of individual that perhaps the harder you push him, the more resistant he becomes. He has very little to lose. So I will certainly move to the direction to try to get it solved as quick as I can, but it's tough to put a deadline on Cracker.
Well, I mean, I'd hate to see it sit there till next February.
Yeah,
no.
You know, I would really hate that.
This is a little easier. It's at least on wheels.
Well, that's good.
Well, part of it.
Or it could be. Okay, let's move on.
Has there been anybody inspect that to see if there's anything on the inside of it?
I do know a gentleman died in the unit, so.
I had heard that.
I don't think he's still in there though.
You never know.
I'm not looking.
Me either. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, no, I was talking about as far as drugs.
As far as, yeah.
Who owns the trail?
Probably Cracker at this point.
Apparently Cracker does.
I mean, was there legal title? I mean, that's another issue you can look at too.
Well,
That'd be an issue to talk with our police chief as to whether anybody can go in and check to see that, you know, if there is any drug paraphernalia in that trailer or anything they can see that would make it a hazard to being there. So,
I'm not even allowed on the property, let alone in the trailer.
yeah. That would be a-
But I have seen teenage boys.
And after you told me that, I have too.
Thank you for
Yeah.
backing me up
Yeah.
on that, yeah. Seen them.
Okay, let's go ahead to our department board reports. Michael?
Actually, two items in front of you. The first is Resolution 2014-01. It's our first resolution of the year. And it's about the halfway point, or it is the halfway point in our fiscal year. About this time, we usually run a budget resolution doing some revisions, just basically some general housekeep on some of our departmental budgets within general fund. We did not do anything to increase or decrease our revenue projections in our budget, so the only thing that we're dealing with as far as revisions tonight are within the general fund's expenditure lines per department. The one line or one department that we're drawing from predominantly is from the council capital outlay line, and we're reducing that. Of course, that was the line that we put a lot of our excess projections into during the fiscal year, at the beginning of the fiscal year 13-14. So we're drawing from that first out of the expenditure line. Currently, that expenditure line is $162,033. Once we go through all of our revisions, that revised line, post approval of the budget resolution, will be $118,533. Out of the lines to be adjusted upwards, most of these lines are just increases, some outer projections of where we may be at the end of the fiscal year. None of these are over with the exception of one. The one line that is over in expenditures is the storm sewer projects. We had appropriated originally $70,000. We're increasing that by $11,000 to $81,000. That is because we had received an invoice from Sam for just over $80,000. Sam Ludlow with the sanitary sewer department, which also does our storm drain work. And that invoice was a little over $80,000, so we're adjusting that accordingly for some storm work that he did in the spring of 2013 that we received invoices for. Other than that, there really isn't anything, in my opinion, that sticks out or should be stressed. Most of these are typical. Again, none of these lines are going over. Some of them are just adjusting accordingly to where they're being projected as far as June 30th of 2014. Have a chance to look over that. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, this is a resolution that has to be approved by City Council by roll call vote, and then ultimately has to be submitted to the West Virginia State Auditor's Office for approval prior before these revisions taking place.
Motion to
Excuse me.
approve resolution 2014-01.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
After for, my question is, of the $118,533, what do you anticipate coming out of that for the rest of the fiscal year?
The money that we use some of those funds for was some of our matching, if you recall, for the playground equipment for the grant application. Realistically, we're not going to expend that money in this fiscal year because we're probably not going to, best case, we're not going to hear back from that grant until the end of March, best case scenario. And again, last year, they didn't hear anything until September. So to be quite honest with you, Ron, to kind of just answer the question, those funds are available for council at council's discretion.
So this is the matching funds for the playground north end, right?
Correct. Some of those
Well, see,
money.
I'm still on this kick about, I would like to see that playground done earlier than what we've anticipated, strictly because it is for the handicapped kids of the city. I would like to see that one done almost as soon as the one we're getting done up at the city park. So if there was any way possible, I wouldn't mind utilizing some of that $118,000 as funds for getting that playground in for those, for the handicapped kids. That's just my viewpoint. Have no idea what the rest of council thinks, but I think we're doing the kids an injustice by going ahead and finishing one at the city park that they cannot use. And I move we approve this resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded.
It is a roll call vote.
Roll call.
Okay.
Pam?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
J. David?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mayor?
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries.
The next item under me is a line item transfer. This isn't as fancy, so to speak, as the budget resolution, because these are line item transfers within each department within general fund, not going from one department's line to another department's line. Again, these are just items that need to be approved through unanimous vote by council. I do not need to go to the auditor. The only changes with those is that we're actually increasing the mayor's postage and decreasing the mayor's capital outlay to cover the offset cost of postage. Postage is not over, but it's trending to go over what we currently had appropriated for it by the June 30th fiscal year end. Mayor's postage, for your information, is just general mailings that are done out through general fund. Newsletters come out of that. A portion of traffic citations and notifications come out of that. Anything that's done within the City Hall office, not really the mayor's office specifically, but City Hall's office, that portion of postage is taken out of that. The other item is council travel. Council travel is being increased by $2,500, and we are reducing council capital outlay by $2,500. So once we get through our resolution, once we get through this, council capital outlay would be $116.33. So it's just going down $2,500. Council travel is just to appropriate and allocate funds for any council members who are wanting to go to West Virginia Municipal Leagues, any of the training sessions that are available throughout the calendar and fiscal year. Also a reminder that we do have a West Virginia midwinter conference coming up the 12th and 13th, I believe, of this month in Charleston. So those again are just line item transfers, do not require submission to the auditor's office, do not require a roll call vote, however, do require a unanimous consent. And those are the only line item transfers. And again, to restate what Mr. Pugh had mentioned, council capital outlay will now be $116,033. And again, that is somewhat of a discretionary fund, but just keep that in mind that throughout the year, sometimes we pull from that to line up our budget, so we don't have to go and increase our revenue projections. So with that said, line item transfers are up for council's consideration and approval.
What do you mean by unanimous consent?
It's a majority.
Majority vote.
Majority consent.
Sorry.
Motion to approve the line item transfers. So moved. Motion made, is there a second? And a second by Pam. Any other questions or discussions? Not all in favor, signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it.
And we are at the halfway point of the fiscal year. So at the next council meeting, I will be presenting to you our mid-year or end of second quarter budget comparing what we did the last fiscal year with this year and where we stand at the halfway point. Prior to the next council meeting, it's budget time, hard to believe. We'll be starting to submit some of the budget worksheets out for our department heads for their submission, and once we collect their information, have a chance to sit down and talk to the department heads. We'll be meeting hopefully sometime in February with the council and the finance committee to go over the 2014-2015 budget.
Questions for Mike?
I just want to pick up a little bit on what Ron said about the North End Park. And when we discussed the last council meeting, one of the issues we talked about was the substantial increase in cost because of the permeable asphalt that's required based on FEMA. And then we have this grant we're looking at. I guess I would say two things. One, we're going to be looking at our next fiscal year, and you're going to be preparing the budget for that. I think you ought to consider taking a look at doing this project with the assumption that we're not going to get the grant. I mean, maybe we are, but if we want to do it beforehand, let's go ahead and do it. If you can find monies in the next year's budget. But I also think that, maybe this is your responsibility, Kenny, as a mayor. But I do think that there are times when a municipality needs to tell the federal government the ridiculousness of some of their regulations that they impose upon taxpayers and residents. And when you think about a 50-space parking lot, and then we want to put 6 spaces there for people with disabilities, and they said because it's in a flood zone, we have to do something much more extraordinary. There is no way the regular asphalt's going to impact any kind of waters that we have flooding over there. I mean, it just doesn't, there's no common sense there. And I just am frustrated with SHPO and all the other things that we talk about in this council, where it's just either increased costs or increased time or both. And I think we ought to take a stand on it once in a while, at least tell people how we feel about it. And I think the paper ought to do that occasionally also. It's just, it makes you wonder where we're going to go as a country. I just had to say that, sorry.
David, in this evening's news, there was some comments made, and I can't tell you exactly which senator or state representative made them, but there was some comments made that the rates for FEMA insurance had skyrocketed this year, and actually they had increased substantially. And the reason they increased was because of severe damage and coastal flooding, particularly some of the hurricanes and so on. And his chief complaint was that you're charging individuals in West Virginia much higher rates based upon flooding that occurred along coastal areas, and coastal areas ought to suffer those consequences, not from backwater from river.
That's like the automobile rates.
We typically have reduced the rates in the city of Buckhannon. We have applied for, and I need to correct that, Amby Jenkins has applied for and received a 10% discount for every resident in the city that has flood insurance by following a very strict set of guidelines in terms of what we can do to have the rates reduced. She gets absolutely nothing out of that. She does it as part of her job and support for the city, because she doesn't have property that would flood, doesn't have to carry flood insurance to begin with. But I agree with you. I think there's lots of issues. Trust me, I deal with FEMA just about on a daily basis, as well as SHPO. And the regulations since I started in 1985 doing this kind of work, with asbestos, with radon, with SHPO, just, it's quadrupled twice in that time frame. So I don't disagree with you, but then again, do you want a paved parking area, or do you want gravel? And if you want a paved parking area, I suggest the quickest route right now is to do what FEMA says.
Yeah, I just, the concern I have is that, our hands are tied constantly, seems like, and regulations can be great for the safety and health and welfare of our citizens, but there's a point, I think, where oftentimes they go overboard, and if we don't say something about it, we probably can't do anything about it, but we will say to them, we think you're wrong, and if enough people do that, maybe somebody will get some common sense, and, I use 40% of our corn crop for fuel when we have excess energy every place else. Doesn't make any sense.
Well, I'm not sure we want to tackle FEMA at this point, but
We can tackle court.
January 12th, 13th, and 14th would be a good opportunity to attack SHPO, because that is a state organization. That's a little
That's
closer
true.
to work on, so I'll be there on the 12th, 13th, and 14th.
Me
and
too.
I'll do what I can.
Good.
Any other comments? Thank you, Michael. Mitch Stacy, Fire Chief.
Good evening, just have a few quick things. We've reported in the past that we had applied for, or were wanting to do some radio upgrades. We just got a letter back from the FCC saying that we will not interfere with Green Bank Observatory or Sugar Grove Naval Base, so now hopefully within the next few months we'll actually get permission to go ahead with our project. So that's taken care of. We're working on a few grants. Our new squad truck, we had orders been delayed. We've hit a couple of snags, something as simple as a trailer hitch. Right now we have 4 new guys that are in our pump operator class. They've taken their state pump op class, and now they're going through the Buckhannon Fire Department operations class. We have 4 guys. What that is, that's training new pump operators to drive our larger fire trucks. And our new guy started the 9th, our new career guy, and so far he's doing well. He's still not working. He's not working by himself yet, and he's still working odds and end hours. So he's moving right along. He's moved on. He's now studying his street maps and hydrant locations. So hopefully, well, within the next 30 days, hopefully he'll be cut loose. So he's just working on some of our in-house training stuff. So that's all I have. Unless somebody has any questions.
Questions for Mitch? Thank you, Mitch. Jay Holland?
I don't think I'll be quite as brief as Mitch, but I'll try. 7 projects to report on.
Thank you, Jay.
Any questions? Any questions? Gateway East were shut down. Winter shutdown was approved from Charleston. Hope to get back on it mid-March, early April on the north side. We'll leave this one today, the Suddenlink fiber optic update. We made a site visit out there today. Looked at 6 poles that were installed by Suddenlink and/or their sub-consultants. 5 of them appear to be on a electrical right-of-way that was granted to the power company, but we don't know whether those poles were allowed in the right-of-way or they needed to be placed outside of. One's on our property, but I'll let Dave touch on that a little more. North Buckhannon Park, that application was submitted the 27th of December. I think Michael said it best, but I don't even anticipate a late March. You know, I look at it mid to late year. The guys told me the gentleman in Charleston has told me numerous times that December, a year from then would be a good time. Just to want to touch on some of the things that Dave and Ron and Rich were saying. I mean, we're dealing with 2 federal agencies, FEMA and the Americans with Disabilities Act. They're very strict. But we also agreed when that property was purchased by the city of Buckhannon and FEMA, provided with the buyout funds, there were certain stipulations that had to be enforced, and those are still tied to that park property, and we have to follow those. We do not want to risk losing our flood insurance, because if you violate those stipulations that they've set forth, then we could lose not just 10%, being knocked down to 5%. They could take it away and take us out of the flood program, the flood insurance program. So that would raise everybody. So, we're treading lightly, but we want to do it the right way. Also, I think they've mentioned before that if we purchase and put in the playground equipment up front, we will not be reimbursed for those funds. So we need to take those into consideration. Item 4, the public safety complex. They're moving along the street department really well down there. I was surprised when we made visits last week and today. They're currently finishing up the last of the drywall on the 2nd floor. We've got the door frames all installed, the primers down there ready to paint. We've received the ceiling grid. That's what we're going to be doing the month of January, getting those ready so that the 3 contractors that I mentioned last time we met can come in, button up the supply and air duct returns, the sprinklers, and the fire alarm systems, get them out of our hair. Then the guys can go putting the ceiling grid in, painting the walls, and then I'll sub out the last item, which will be the placement of the floor, either the tile or carpet. So we're moving along, but as tonight's event, that's any indication, the guys will be pretty busy tomorrow morning, so we may not be there in full force or at all. It just depends on what the weather does. So that's where we are on the public safety complex. Leads me over to Island Avenue. As soon as I'm done with submittals, some shot drawing reviews on the public safety complex for the doors and the types of light fixtures, which will not hold up the crews at all, but it has to be done. I'll go back to work on Island Avenue. I want to have that engineering designed and done, hopefully late March, early submittal to the state for approval. And then as Michael finds some funds, as we're remixing budgets and stuff like that, that'll be a shelf-ready project. It'll be rolled up, put on a shelf, and when we have time, the water department will, replace the Island Avenue water line. Met with Chapman Technical Group about a week and a half ago at the water board meeting. We have entered into a contract for 2 of the 3 tasks that were identified. Task number 1 is just a general engineering contract that if we need something, loading dock or the stairs crack and it needs some structural engineering, there's an agreement in place since they're our engineer of record for that particular project, and this is at the water treatment plant. Then we can hire them on an hourly basis and have them work on the project. Something that's unforeseen. Don't anticipate using or enforcing any of the task order number 1. I hope not, because that means something goes wrong. Task order number 3, that's what we're going to start on immediately, which is the structural renovation, repairs of the cracks, and the replacement of the mechanical treatment equipment, and upgrades to the pipe control valving. Task order number 2, that's the one that I believe is really important for the city of Buckhannon in the next 15 to 20 years. That's where we've identified city employees with the water department, at the plant, the distribution system, and myself. We've identified about 20 items that need to be addressed long-term, and we need to have some more detailed reports and cost estimates generated. That will give us a guide for the next 15 to 20 years of how to maintain and upgrade the water treatment plant as necessary, so that we're staying out front, able to keep our rates as low as possible and have the latest equipment and treatment processes. We're going to put that on hold for about a year, as far as entering into that agreement, but they know what we want to do. I think it's a good idea to have that guidebook so that whoever is here, be it the city administration, the city engineer, whoever, there'll at least be a guide to follow in maintaining the plant. And I really would like to see that one done. And finally, the Route 20 lane widening. I didn't want to mention, since Dave doesn't want to mention SHPO, I'll try to be brief, but SHPO and the DOH are currently working some issues out. I reported on that briefly last time. It seems that the project's been pushed back even another month. They submitted their final right-of-way plans internally and to SHPO 2 weeks ago, but they won't be able to conduct their final field review until at least March, so that SHPO has adequate time to review the plans and hopefully work out an agreement. Looking at August 2014 to advertise the project, and September of 2014 to let it go to construction. And that's best case. What started out as May has now already been moved back to September. And that's all I have.
We'll work there when school's in session.
Yeah, and I think there'll be a lot of issues with that. It may become a 2015 project.
The SHPO argument is having to do with the hedges, is that all?
They wouldn't identify, they're saying that they have issues and environmental concerns with some property. They don't, that's the way the project manager for the DOH is.
Wonder, what if the property owner would cut that stuff down?
Then I don't know how much of an issue it would be, but they're working on that. They need a SHPO clearance, and they're currently working on that, hopefully to avoid a memorandum of agreement where all 3 parties, the state, SHPO, and the property owners, work together to reach some sort of agreement. But
And they won't identify to us what the issue is.
Oh my God,
Unbelievable.
the secrets they keep.
So everything will slide back.
They have to justify their jobs.
That's a problem.
Don't go too far here now.
It's ridiculous. I mean, we've been talking about this stuff for
Yeah.
God knows.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing for everybody, quite frankly.
Any other questions for Jay?
Jay, just want to comment, you noted, and I was gonna allude to it earlier, but the handicap playground equipment, I'm very supportive of. I had a nephew that was handicapped that would have made great use of that. However, I don't believe we even had a request. I don't ever remember one for handicap equipment for playground.
No.
Until we advertised the fact we were doing a playground at City Park, and that's when the first note that I know of came in, and that was actually not even from somebody that was a resident of the city. But in any event, you do note that, you know, should we go ahead and do some of this stuff ahead of time, we would probably not qualify for reimbursement.
Michael's had that conversation and I've had that conversation.
And I just want to point that out. The earliest point at which we get a denial, I'm all for go ahead and fund the project.
Right.
And go with it. But I'm not willing to spend dollars that might in fact be grant dollars when we're talking the kind of money that we're talking about. If we can help it.
Well, the issue there is that if you can get a grant for $80,000, which, you know, Rich, I agree with you about the denial. If we get one, then we should proceed immediately. But if you can get a grant, you know, we just have to tell residents that we may have to wait an extra year to do that playground. Because $80,000 can do a lot of good someplace else too.
Exactly.
That's
right.
So,
I
I
mean,
mean, those are tough issues we all have to make, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't think we'd want to put the cart before the horse on this, but I mean, yes, we'd like to see it done for next spring and summer, but if it means being able to use those $67,000 to $80,000 worth of funds on other projects, I would like, because, you know, all departments have something that needs to be completed, and I think we should use a little bit of, exercise a little caution on just jumping out on that really quick.
For that amount of money.
I just don't want us to forget about that project over
Yeah.
there. If the money doesn't come through, I don't want to forget about it.
I don't think anybody, I don't want to forget about it either.
There's been too much time and effort put into the design of that.
It's
And I have like a heart in that, so I don't think we're gonna let it go that easy.
No, I don't think we'll let it or the comprehensive.
It was pretty much November.
What was that, 6.5 pounds metal? We figure out.
2 inches thick and 3 pounds per each application.
We put a little work into it.
Yeah, we put a little.
It was a lengthy application.
It was.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right.
Dave?
Thank you, Mayor. TV cable, Sudden Lake. Jay and I were over at the cemetery site before the snow started this afternoon. And the 6 or 7 poles that were installed, it appears as though 5 of them are probably within, we need to determine the precise dimensions of the power company right-of-way, that they were installed within that power company right-of-way. Understand that this is we're still talking about city property. You might recall that I bet Michael Kellum a steak dinner at the TV cable board meeting a month ago, and bonanza it might be on me. There is a statute, chapter 24D, and I broke the photocopy machine right before the meeting, so I couldn't even print it out for everybody, but I will get it to you. 24D, chapter 24D, article 1, section 9. Here's what it reads. A cable franchise shall be construed to authorize the construction or operation of a cable system, 1, over public rights-of-way, that would be streets, alleys, that kind of thing. 2, through easements which are within the area to be served by the cable system and which have been dedicated for compatible uses. And then just a couple of years ago, the state legislature added a definition for compatible use because I guess this question may have come up elsewhere. An easement dedicated for compatible uses is a public or private easement for electric, gas, telephone, or other utility transmissions. So it's in there. They lobbied apparently hard for it. The cable industry did. Public Service Commission signed off on it and supported it, and our state legislature has basically further encumbered not only City of Buckhannon rights of ways, but power company, telephone company. Now, here's my issue. These new poles that were installed within the power company right of way, You would think that you would be talking about, if existing poles are already out there, the power company automatically gets the right to go string their fiber, their coax, whatever it is, on existing poles. There were 7 new poles installed, all right? Now, notwithstanding that issue with the power company right-of-way, about 100 to 150 feet of the line that goes over to the head end area right beside our water tank clearly would not be within the power company right-of-way. It's on City of Buckhannon property without any easement whatsoever. And that's probably the reason Mr. Holland and I have surmised as to why the city was broached at all about this. That they recognized that a segment of this roughly 1,000 feet of fiber optic cable being strung was not going to be covered by the power company right-of-way. So the issue is still there. We still have to negotiate something with Sudden Lake. I will contact Mr. Kellerman next week again to see where his company stands as far as remuneration, what they want to offer for this additional right-of-way. And then, of course, I'll bring it back to council for your further consideration. So I think I'm down for a cheap steak, given the circumstances. This would be an expensive
Mayor's
steak.
going for a cheeseburger.
What is the practical remuneration? I can't talk tonight, but what would you think, David? Do you have any precedent?
For 150 feet of stringing fiber optic cable, Mr. Thomas, I don't know.
$500.
You know, we're not talking a big sum of money. I mean, I would, from my perspective, I would recommend to the council that if we could sort of tie this into our negotiations with the soon to expire, less than a year now, the TV cable franchise will expire. If we can tie it into that with some leverage to get some things for our citizens who happen to be their subscribers, I'd almost rather see us go that route.
Oh, we did. We got a $7 raise.
Yeah.
You got something, right?
Yeah.
So it's you know, Mr. Clemens points me to some of the social media sites and people that have too much time on their hands choose to talk about the Sudden Link issues and that the city is in bed with the cable company, and I hear things like this all the time. Understand, again, I've probably said this 200 times in the last 30 years. We cannot regulate the rates that Sudden Lake charges. The recent increases, there was no acquiescence to that. There was no vote by the city council. There was no recommendation by the TV cable board. We're always distressed about the high price of TV cable as non-city officials. And when it comes to programming, there is absolutely nothing that local governmental entities can do to direct what's on the dial either.
So I also just read that Dish Network and DirecTV are having their largest rate increases in several years that are about to be forthcoming too for their consumers. So it seems like it's everywhere.
There's one other issue you bring up, and sometimes I forget who I've told this to, Mr. Waltz. The cable company has been lobbying Congress and the FCC to allow to be put on a level playing field so that the Dish Network and satellite providers would be charged the same kinds of fees that they are charged. But the difference is those signals are coming from outer space. When you string coax or fiber over the streets and sidewalks, that's the reason that the city gets the 5%. Similar to what the city realizes from the electric company and the power company. Those are franchises. We are giving something to those utility providers in exchange for getting something from them. For us to just be able to say, yeah, we want to bill the Dish Network 5% of whatever they're charging. We're not giving them anything. We don't own that space out there and above us. So anyway. Okay, a couple other quick things, and I'll be quiet because I've got 2 ordinances to present to you under your new business. Still nothing from Mr. Ehlenfeld, holiday thing and the whole bit. I will, again, try next week to contact him. What we had discussed before, just as a reminder, I'm friends of his family, old Wheeling boy. I'm going to call up there and talk with them and see if we can arrange a meeting with city officials so that we can impress upon them how much our city police department was involved in the hot stuff, cool things investigation. Since the last meeting, sent materials to Michael Madsen with Insurance Auto Auctions. That's the successor in interest to Auto Disposal Systems, ADS, that is located within the city limits. You might recall they want to annex about 6 new acres that they've just acquired into the city limits. And there's information on that petition that I need from him, who the president of the company is, who the authorized representative is to sign the petition, information such as that, their corporate headquarters address. So I'm awaiting that. As soon as we have that, I can finish the petition and get that back to them. In the last, gosh, I lost my Post-it notes now. I identified 6 or 7 ordinances about middle of November for you all, things we would be working on. 2 of them are on your table tonight. Some of the other ones that Mr. Clemens and I are working on would be the new creation of the new college zone and creation of the new military zone. There's also a rental registry that was recently adopted by ordinance by the city of Elkins that we think would be beneficial for Buckhannon to consider. I provided the Elkins ordinance to you about 2 months ago, so you might blow the dust off of that one and refresh your memories about that. The drug house ordinance is something still coming. That's separate from the meth abatement ordinance that you're going to look at in first reading tonight. And then Michael Doss also has a couple of things that he wants me to look at relative to competitive bidding, removing the ceiling that is statutorily imposed, that we can eliminate that ceiling if we want to, and also a matter dealing with water rates soon. So it never stops. There's always half a dozen ordinances around the corner. Oh, the Mark Carroll trade, we're waiting on a plat on that. That one's coming also. That's all I have, unless you all have questions for me.
Questions for David?
I do want to clarify one thing. We're not looking at eliminating competitive bidding. It's just the ceiling for that is around $25,000, and for some things that we do, possibly looking at increasing that. Some of the things that we do are over $25,000, so we're not looking at eliminating competitive bidding. I understand. Clarify that.
Does anybody know, does Link offer a weekend or a week of free cable for certain channels or anything like HBO or something like that?
I don't know.
They do in other cities and stuff like that, and I was just wondering, that will be something, they might give us a chance to monitor some of the new channels or something they're gonna put on that they're charging for, or I know it used to be like 10 years ago they would do that. They also used to give some free coupons for free movies every now and then to their subscribers, but haven't seen that for a while either. So, we need some perks from the people.
The cable industry, as we discussed at the TV Cable Board meeting just about a month ago, is really on some immensely moving tectonic plates. I mean, we're just talking 5 years from that industry being completely reconfigured. I mean, when Suddenlink's president, Jerry Kent, comes out and says we're soon to be the next dinosaur, I mean, when a guy that's one of the most substantial owners in that industry in the world says that, he knows what he's talking about. So things are going to change so much with the internet and picking up whatever you want to on the internet. The TV cable, as we know it right now, may not exist 10 years from now. This may be our last franchise.
Could be.
Yeah, for less than $100, you can buy a box at Walmart, come back, plug it into your internet, and get free movies or low-cost movies, $7 a month kind of thing. So.
But the cable company has to allow you to do that.
No, they don't.
Is this that one that we're talking about?
Nope.
Voodoo,
Go buy one.
or what?
Roku,
Roku?
Apple TV, all those you can do without their permission.
for $100, huh?
Less than 48 is low as you can
You
get.
got
That's a
that?
one-time payment.
You buy it. Okay,
Move return.
correspondence in your packet. There's a notice for the public hearing, which we had, and a request to use Jawbone Park, which we'll take up under the consent agenda, which is the approval of minutes of regular meeting December 19th, building and wiring permits, payment of the bills, and the request to use Jawbone Park June 1 through October 31, 2014 for farmer's market. Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I so moved.
Second.
And second. Further discussion? All in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Back to you, Dave.
Mayor, these will be by caption only.
Wait a minute,
That
Dave.
lady wanted to speak about something.
May I say something? I just have one question about the lovely new home in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
I believe that it's parked there legally.
Yes.
Now, would the chief of police have the authorization to impound that if it's parked illegally?
I referred the police to the
Well,
matter.
why I ask is because I know that part of it is on the city property. It's not all on his lot.
There's many cases in town where that might be true, but I'll ask the chief if he wants to proceed with that.
What,
Of course, you probably don't want to impound such a beautiful home.
Probably don't want to.
We wouldn't want to take that beautiful home away from the owner, no. Wouldn't want to deprive him of it.
Well, what do you suggest that the neighbors do? What can we do?
Well, we're gonna try to get that out of there. Rich is gonna work with Cracker, try to get that. It's supposed to just be stopped there because it was broke. He's supposed to get it out of there, and we'll see. If he doesn't within a reasonable time, we'll work on this new ordinance with him. We'll get it. David?
Thank you, Mayor. This is ordinance 378 of the city of Buckhannon. You've noted, Mayor, that there has been a legal ad printed Class 2 in the Record Delaware the past 2 Wednesdays, and it's mature for you to act on second reading after I read it by caption. Ordinance number 378 of the city of Buckhannon, and ordinance amending ordinance number 377 of the city of Buckhannon by 1, establishing a minimum fee of $100 for all commercial inspections, 2, providing clarification that all rental properties shall be deemed to be commercial properties for purposes of administering the city of Buckhannon's electrical inspection and fire protection ordinance, and 3, exempting certain electrical work as performed by licensed electricians upon or within commercial premises from inspections, but provided that the work does not involve wiring within the inner recesses of walls, ceilings, and/or floors. It is my recommendation to the council that you consider on second reading this evening ordinance 378 of the city of Buckhannon.
Is this final?
This is the final reading, Mayor.
Okay. Motion to approve ordinance number 378 on final reading. Motion made, Waltz. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? All in favor signify so by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Thank you, David. Go
Yes,
ahead.
Mayor. This is ordinance 379 of the city of Buckhannon. I've provided a draft to you at the last meeting. It's now got a lot more substance to it. Be careful when looking at the ordinance in your packet. Mr. Clemens has given you the actual baby that we're looking at tonight. Ordinance 379 of the city of Buckhannon, an ordinance adopting the United States Environmental Protection Agency's guidelines for methamphetamine laboratory cleanup, revised edition, March 2013. I spent 10 minutes reading that 2.5 pages of whereases to you last time. I'll spare you on that one. But I do want to point out the findings of council. I've made a few changes to that. Just observe the definitions, and then we'll get into the 2 articles that I think are provide the real teeth of this ordinance. Findings of council. The council of the city of Buckhannon hereby makes the following findings. 1, the city of Buckhannon is committed to minimizing hazards pose to public health and safety, and to protect its residents to the maximum extent possible. 2, the city already has taken substantial steps to combat its local and ongoing war on drugs. 3, substantial hazards are posed to the residents of Buckhannon, and particularly to the developing respiratory and neurological systems of children as a consequence of exposure to premises wherein methamphetamine previously was consumed or manufactured. 4, upon a reasonable determination that particular premises have been occupied by persons either consuming or manufacturing meth therein, inspection and testing, and when applicable, cleanup, remediation, and contamination abatement must ensue prior to reoccupancy of the premises by other persons. And 5, inspection, testing, cleanup, remediation, and contamination abatement procedures prescribed herein shall follow the federal EPA guidelines for methamphetamine laboratory cleanup, which guidelines are expressly hereby adopted by the city of Buckhannon. In Article 2, some of the definitions, EPA guidelines, I mentioned this just briefly last time. There's actually 2 different types of inspections that occur. There's the first entry inspection, also known as gross removal. This is more tied in with the policeman and fire departmental concerns. When a meth lab has been identified, you see our cops and our firefighters in hazmat outfits going in and removing the proof of the drug, if you will. That doesn't have anything to do with the EPA guidelines. The EPA guidelines reference and mention first entry inspections, but what we're really looking at is more within the meth contamination abatement, remediation, and remediation inspection, which are items 4, 5, and 6 under definitions. Meth contamination abatement. The meth contamination abatement process is a series of removal, cleaning, and decontamination steps used to restore a contaminated area to its original non-contaminated condition. Remediation. The cleanup of residual meth contamination after gross removal has occurred, which is necessary to allow unrestricted future use of the former meth lab or meth consumption site. And 6, remediation inspection. That inspection occurring after gross removal to determine if a former meth lab or meth consumption site requires remediation. I think the most important article of this ordinance is Article 3, and there's actually 7 different potential steps to what would be entailed in Buckhannon if you adopt this ordinance. 1, upon the conclusion of any investigation conducted by the Buckhannon Police Department, or upon learning of the conclusion of any investigation conducted by any other local, state, or federal police agency that results in either the arrest or conviction of any person for either use or manufacturing of methamphetamine, and further upon the reasonable determination that such use or manufacturing of methamphetamine occurred upon real estate situated within the corporate limits of the city of Buckhannon, the Buckhannon Police Chief shall notify in writing the city of Buckhannon's zoning officer of such findings. That's the first step. Police awareness being shared with the city zoning officer. 2, upon receipt of such written notification from the Buckhannon Police Chief, the city zoning officer then shall promptly notify in writing, sent by certified mail, return receipt requested, or served personally, the owner of such real estate of the police chief's findings. Additionally, the zoning officer's notice shall identify the property owner's need to immediately undertake an inspection, also known as a methamphetamine assessment, to determine the presence of meth contamination, and further to determine the reasonable and necessary abatement actions to be undertaken in the event that meth contamination is found. The meth assessment shall be undertaken by a professional contractor experienced in meth inspection and meth contamination abatement. And there's a slew of these contractors identified all over the internet, many in West Virginia. 3, the samples taken from the inspected premises then shall be fully evaluated by a professional experienced meth testing laboratory. Upon receipt of the test results from the testing laboratory, the contractor shall promptly provide in writing all test results and lab findings, together with all recommendations for contamination abatement simultaneously to both the property owner and the city zoning officer. 4, upon receipt of written findings establishing that meth contamination exists within the subject premises, the property owner shall immediately vacate the subject premises and direct all other persons to immediately vacate the premises. The city zoning officer then shall promptly post written notice at all entrance points of the subject property declaring the premises to be uninhabitable pending completion of meth contamination abatement, re-inspection, and written certification establishing that the meth contamination has been fully abated. 5, upon written contractor certification that meth contamination has been fully abated, the city zoning officer then shall remove the written non-habitability notices from the premises and issue a re-occupancy permit to the property owner. The premises only then may be reoccupied. 6, all costs and expenses associated with all inspections, laboratory testing, contamination abatement, re-inspection, compliance certification, and any and all other activities, either required herein or naturally resulting herefrom, shall be borne entirely by the property owner, and the city of Buckhannon shall have no responsibility whatsoever by the property owner pursuant to this ordinance. 7, all inspections, assessments, laboratory testing.
Skip the line.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Responsibility whatsoever, start there again.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Shall have no responsibility whatsoever to pay any cost or expenses related to the activities required to be undertaken by the property owner pursuant to this ordinance. I was just checking to see if you guys were listening. 7, all inspections, assessments, laboratory testing, contamination abatement, re-inspection, compliance certification, and any and all other activities either required herein or naturally resulting herefrom shall be conducted in conformity with the March 2013 federal EPA guidelines for methamphetamine laboratory cleanup or such future amendments thereto as may be applicable. Article 4 is the automatic adoption of future EPA guidelines. You can anticipate that every so often the EPA will update its own guidelines. Article 5, and I think this is an important one too, and it's short, so let me read it to you. City official and landlord cooperation and city official information and workshops. Ed, city officials understand and appreciate the hardships resulting to landlords who rent premises to tenants who consume and/or manufacture meth upon their rented premises. B, city officials shall seek to reach out to landlords and to provide information and workshops that will assist in landlord identification of meth users and/or manufacturers. C, landlords are urged to contact law enforcement agencies immediately upon suspicion of meth activities occurring within their rented premises. The earlier that police intervention occurs, the less meth contamination that may result to the rented premises, hence lowering meth contamination abatement costs to the landlord. Article 6, violations, penalties, and jurisdictions of city's municipal court, and penalties for violation of this ordinance. Every day that there is a violation amounts to a possible $500 fine. Article 7 is the severability article that we put in virtually all of our ordinances. And the effective date has been corrected. First reading tonight, second reading January 16. And if you pass it at your meeting on January 16, it would be effectuated on February 15 of 2014. Be happy to address any questions you may have.
So if the landlord is notified that there is an offense under this and does nothing about it, then he is subject to the articles under Article 6,
$500
fine and all that stuff.
That's correct. If we didn't have that in there, there would be absolutely no teeth to the ordinance. And I'm not suggesting that if Mr. Clemens gets this information, writes a letter and say, we'd like to hear from you in the next 5, 7, 10 days, whatever it is, and no response comes. We work with people a lot, but you got to sometimes have something out there of a coercive nature that if they just point blank won't work with you, it's there in case we need to use it. And money talks, so
Well, that's the way all our ordinances are for. They're there in case we need to use them, and in some of them, we don't use them enough,
Maybe so.
so.
Motion to approve ordinance number 379 on first reading.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Discussion. All in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Mayor, it mentions a workshop in here. I'd like to get for us to set one of those up as soon as possible after this passes, because there is a lot of landlords in the city of Buckhannon.
Yep.
And-
I don't think there's any reason to wait until it passes the workshop.
And
State police will typically
we can have those anytime.
put those on
and,
for us.
So are we planning on getting one set up?
I can get one set up if you
I
like, sure.
think.
I spoke with Matt Gregory earlier today about that, about this ordinance in general, including the workshop notion, and he's very, very supportive of that. He sees this as another tool in his arsenal, and it really is a war on drugs, even if the current administration has decided to call it something else. Maybe you got to get in the trenches to realize there is a war going on out there sometimes.
Okay, brings us comment and announcements. Ron?
Nothing that I haven't already said this evening.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Tom is especially quiet this evening. Rich?
Happy New Year.
John? Pam?
I just have a couple of things I want to say. Number one is, I didn't say anything last year, but the lights down at Jawbone for Christmas, I think looked terrible. I didn't, all the reefs are not lit up, and, I mean, right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And it happened last year.
Yeah,
The
they had
tree-
some scallywags going down there and unplugging them.
Well, the tree looks beautiful, but if we're gonna put those reefs up down there, they need to be done right. And I've heard that from other people also.
Actually, the day they put those up, not trying to make excuses for them, but the day they put them up was day like right now. And the street department didn't have any guidance. They hung them upside down. So they were
Well,
kind
what
of a
I'm
problem
saying
to
is,
begin with.
it was like that last year, so I didn't say anything.
Yeah, I don't think it was
So-
like that last year, because I helped put them up.
Well,
They were immaculate last year, until some of the heathens got to them.
and this is my opinion, the stoplights that we took down, I still feel we need to put the stop sign where the stoplight was instead of
going
on the
up.
side.
And that's,
In process.
we approved doing that, and that's gonna happen, yeah.
Okay, and also want to remind everybody about starting January 13th, if you're planning on running for the election, you can start coming in and registering for that.
You register at City Hall, but the elections will be handled by the county.
Right. That's it.
David?
No comments.
No comments. Anybody else? Okay, Happy New Year. Thank y'all for coming.
We're